He ran against John Cornyn. He was definitely the better man in the race.
That's a fact.
That's a fact. Anyway, he's going to address a few issues of concern here, and I really like him because he's from kind of down my neck of the woods. Liberty County, Hardin County is where I'm from. We all go down there where the mosquitoes are thick and the black gumbo.
That's where I stayed.
That's where he stays.
I'm from Rusk County.
Dwayne Stovall. Dwayne, go ahead.
What I'm doing today is quite a bit different than campaigning. I'm going to share with y'all a few things that I've learned to be true. This is absolutely truth to power today. A lot of things I'm going to talk about with you that you're going to disagree with. And I would just say, listen to everything I'm saying, go home and try to prove me wrong, and contact me and let me know if you find out if you can. I'd like to know it. The other part of what I'm going to talk about today is the last 2.5 months of the campaign, we had a private investigator and a number of investigative journalists and their resources working on my behalf. Because in case y'all don't know, I'm just a native Texan who's a regular citizen. I did not have any connection to the political process whatsoever. What I learned in the last 2 months of that campaign would make your blood boil. I'll just put it to you this way. The way we are manipulated as voters, take everything that you think is wrong with politics and multiply it about 100 times. It was rubbed in my face the last 2 months of that campaign by people outside the state of Texas who were kind of initiating me into how it all works. I'm going to get into that too. I'll make that as short of explanation as I can get. That's the second half. In January, I started something called Keep Texas Free. It's an initiative to help share these pieces of information with everybody. Some things that we have to know as citizens of Texas. We have to know these. If you disagree with it, fine. You still need to know it. You need to go research it yourself. And to share with everybody what I learned about politics and on the federal level. That's a whole other issue, but it's something we all need to know that as well. So right now I'm on a journey to share what I learned as just a regular Texan, regular citizen, with every single Texan I can possibly get the ear of. And you guys happen to be one of the early guinea pigs. This PowerPoint is my creation. So if you see me turning and looking at it and reading with you or reading, it's because I'm screening it right now as we go along. Because if you find anything wrong with it, point it out to me. I am not a computer guru nor a PowerPoint specialist, but we're going to do what we can do. This is a t-shirt that we're going to have coming out of Texas Free. Just in case you're wondering, these flags are great. I've had tons of them. But that's been a lie for about a century. For about a century. It's don't tread on me, it's get your boot off my neck. That's where we're at today. This is not a joke. When we sit back and really look at the relationship we have with the federal government today, we're not getting tread on, we're getting rolled over. It's ugly. But there's a reason for that, and we participate in it. Show of hands, how many people are ready for the Supreme Court to step up and say marriage is between one man and one woman? You are going to love me. Not.
Yep.
Okay. Everybody that raised your hand, that flag, you can't have one. You're helping it. I'll explain. Which is more powerful, the state government or the federal government? Which century? Constitutionally. Which government is stronger? The state government?
Yeah.
Sounds good coming out. We're just saying it because we hear about that all the time. It's true. State government is supposed to be. Let me see if I can get out of here. The state. Hey, this is padded. Y'all are jealous. Y'all are so jealous. Yes, the state government is supposed to be the expansive power. Are we on the right track?
No.
I think it's like 75 or 80% of Americans today, regardless of party affiliation, say that we're not going the right direction. Now, some of them I don't want to know what direction they think we ought to be going. But we know we're not doing something right. Why are we not doing it right? Why are we not on the right track? Everybody gets up and says, what is wrong with we're messed up because of X, or we're doing this because of Y, or whatever. I'm telling you, I think I found the problem. Well, yeah, it's you got it right. The federal government was never meant to be involved in the affairs of the individual states beyond the limited enumerated powers it was delegated. Never. It's not supposed to be in your state managing your state affairs. That's the crux of kind of the issue here. And I'll broaden that as we go along. The Constitution was based in three principles. One is federalism, one is republicanism, and one is limited government. Limited government's real simple. That's our freedom. You can replace liberty with limited government anywhere you use it, and it's the same thing. Smaller government, more freedom. Larger the government, less freedom. Never been a government in the history of mankind that was so large that people were so much more free. It doesn't work that way. Republicanism is the basic principle that we're going to have a government that is representative of the people. And you'll elect people who are most closely in context with you. You will know something about them. We don't have that today, but that's the second principle. The first and most the priority we have here is federalism. Learn that word. Learn its meaning. We're going to talk about it here for a little bit. Take it home. Talk to your kids. Talk to your neighbors. This is the principle that is totally killing us. We've lost it completely. 10th Amendment. Everybody loves to talk about the 10th Amendment, right? The old silent number 10. Nobody ever talks about it in the legal range because nobody wants to use it. It is a constitutional explanation of federalism. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. When you talk about a state, you are talking about its people. The states or the people, a group of people inside the borders of Texas is Texas. It's the same thing. We all here represent a portion of Texas. The states are respectively the people. We are the ones who are supposed to have all the powers not delegated to the federal government, right? The Constitution of the United States created a government based in federalism with limited power. With limited power. Today we have an unconstitutional government based in nationalism with unlimited powers. And anybody in here who thinks that Constitution does anything to seriously limit the federal government, I need you to show me. That government can do anything it wants, any time it wants, any day it wants. And there's nothing we can do about it yet. And basically, we kind of agree with them half the time. We want them to do it half the time. This was out of a letter from Thomas Jefferson to John Taylor. This is after the Constitution. This is after he's reviewed it. He's giving his viewpoint. And what you need to remember is, and I have Jeffersonian principles, by the way. I am a Republican by registry, but I have Jeffersonian principles, which is not what the Republican Party represents anymore. He said that governments are more or less Republican as they have more or less the element of popular election and control in their composition. The mass of the citizens is the safest depository of their own rights. He goes on to say, especially that the evils flowing from the duperies of the people, meaning the misalignment, misactivities of the people, are less injurious than those from the egoism of their agents. I am a friend to that composition of government which has in it the most of this ingredient, meaning the most power with the people, the most federalism. Federalism versus nationalism. This is the crux of our issue today, by the way. Federalism is when the states hold expansive powers and the central government's powers are limited. Nationalism is when all the power is held by the central government, with the states being utilized as subordinate administrators. Sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
There's our problem. We've been nationalized. We worry as much about the state of California as we do about Texas. When the citizens of a supposedly free and independent state, remember that Declaration of Independence? Useless document in that day, isn't it? Stated clearly that we rightfully are supposed to be free and independent states. Capital S, not little s. When citizens of a free and independent state abdicate the power to manage the affairs of their state to the federal government. Do we live in the United States of America in a free and independent state of Texas? Or do we live in the United State, singular, of America, and we live in the county of Texas? You ever thought about that? It's true. Our state legislature gets together once every 2 years to do what? Is it to manage the affairs of Texas? Or is it to get together to negotiate as much of the money they can get from the federal government as they can, to turn around to us and say, look what we got for you, and this is how much we're going to spend, and oh, by the way, the federal government gave it to us, but they gave us these mandates too. Right? You know, we can't feed your kid fried chicken in school, but look, we got this money. Can't feed them cake. Don't get me started, I sit on the school board too. How did we become nationalized? Thomas Jefferson has said this, and it's absolutely spot on. Constitution on this hypothesis is a mere thing of wax in the hands of the judiciary, which they may twist and shape into any form they please. And that's exactly what they've done. For over 100 years, the judiciary has twisted that document and taken power where it didn't have it, where it was not supposed to have it. Weak Congresses and power-hungry presidents have surely been a part of our decline, but nothing has done more damage to state sovereignty and the Constitution than the Supreme Court. And I'll argue that with anybody all day long. Had that discussion with a Supreme Court justice in Texas, and he agreed with me. There are three primary reasons for this decline. One is the Commerce Clause, and everybody understands they use the Commerce Clause like a hammer. It authorizes the federal government to keep commerce regular between the states, but never to regulate all commerce inside a state. There's a clear differentiation. They have no business being inside the state of Texas regulating our industry, our economy. None. Zero. Keeping regular between the states was a simple authority given to them to try and keep states from using taxation to abuse the state next to them, to utilize their own industry over somebody across the border. It was very simple for them. They have expanded that immensely. The 17th Amendment, everybody understands the 17th Amendment took away the states' right to appoint their U.S. senators, made them popularly elected. Well, by the way, that was the only check built into this Constitution, other than us, the people. The only check built into the Constitution for the states was the U.S. Senate. And they took that away 100 years ago. So we have people like John Cornyn, who represents zero Texans. Zero. Now, maybe a few corporatists in Texas who have relationships with the federal government. But other than those few, represents none of us. Consistently votes to enslave us in debt. Now, the third one is the incorporation doctrine. How many have ever heard of the incorporation doctrine? This is where it's going to get sticky. You need to know what this is. It's been around for 100 years. It's a creation of 20th century judges that unconstitutionally uses the 14th Amendment to incorporate, which means apply, the Federal Bill of Rights onto the states. Sounds simple. It's lethal. It's lethal. It subverts state sovereignty in ways you would never imagine. Now, here's the deal. I asked you a question earlier. I'm going to ask you, do you believe the Bill of Rights and the federal Constitution protects you from the federal government? Easy question. Don't think too hard. This isn't a trick question. Absolutely. As designed. Protects you from the federal government. Do you believe the Bill of Rights and the federal Constitution protects you from your state government? I hate to get all historical on everybody tonight, but trust me, you want to hear these things, it's absolute truth. This is not fiction being blown at you on media. No, it does not protect you from your state. It was never designed to do that at all. To truly support the Constitution, federalism, and limited government, we were required to reject the notion that the Bill of Rights and the federal Constitution applies to the states. It does not. What you said earlier, there are 50 states with 50 different constitutions, with 50 different bills of rights. I literally asked a group in 912 last week in Fort Worth, how many bills of rights are there? And about 20 people raised their hands and said 1. I said, well, no, there's 50. 51. Actually.
51, yeah.
And one man said, no, there's only one that counts. That's nationalized. Allowing the federal government to regulate state laws through the Bill of Rights, the Federal Bill of Rights, has played a large part in the destruction of federalism, the Constitution, and the design of the Union. It has allowed essentially all governing power to be centralized. That incorporation doctrine has driven almost every aspect of our lives and the control of it into the middle, into the central. I'm going to explain to you more about why I did that. It's obliterated state sovereignty and it's made we, the people of all the states, subject to the whims of a few elites and an all-powerful national government. This is the preamble to the Bill of Rights. Everybody's got a pocket copy of the Constitution. I suggest everybody get out and really read the words. The words. The preamble to the Bill of Rights is the legal description of the Bill of Rights. Everybody understands the Bill of Rights was the very first order of business by the very first Congress. People like George Mason and Elbridge Gerry, Edmund Randolph, numerous of these people who were in Philadelphia would not sign off on the Constitution. Wouldn't have any part of it. Didn't want it. Patrick Henry went to his state capital, or his state debates for the ratification debates when they were trying to pass the Constitution and spoke against it and said, you will have a king.
You will have a what?
You'll have a king. This Constitution will create a king. Give it time. Do we have a king? Oh boy. Hello. What's that, Congress? A potted plant? Somebody said that last year, I believe. This is the preamble. Listen to the words. The conventions of a number of the states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers. Let me tell you something. The men that were involved in this labored. They labored over every single period and every single comma and every single usage of its, or a capital S, or a lowercase n. Nation, as in a country, not a government. State, as in a country, not a subservient. Capital S's all through the Constitution. Your state is your nation. Capital N. But I always joke with everybody, and y'all probably heard me say this. When I say nation, I'm talking about Texas.
Amen.
Misconstruction or abuse of its powers, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added, and as extending to the ground of public confidence in the government, the new government, will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. Its. When you tell people that numerous states, when they signed off on the Bill of Rights, had state religion, a lot of people don't know that. Why would they sign off on a document that's going to allow the federal government to regulate religion in their state? They wouldn't. States like Connecticut charged state tax for Puritanism for decades. They would have never signed off on a Bill of Rights that would have restricted their own abilities. None. This is just a little tidbit. In 1787, 70 delegates showed up in Philadelphia. Only 50 were called to Philadelphia. Only 55 attended. Of those, only 39 actually signed that document. Lots of people opposed the Constitution for numerous reasons. Hamilton opposed he signed off on it, but Hamilton opposed everything because the states were too powerful. Patrick Henry opposed it because the states weren't powerful enough and secured enough. And they argued the exact same point. This is not in the program, I'm just going to tell you all this. Hamilton went to New York and argued against the Constitution because the states were too powerful. Patrick Henry argued against the Constitution because the federal government would be too powerful. Or excuse me, there were people that argued that the states were going to be powerful and they argued in favor of it. Patrick Henry was one. Hamilton used the states' independence and strength against the Constitution as if it was a problem. I think if Patrick Henry showed up today, Hamilton showed up today, he'd think we overshot him by a long way. I think he would think, what are you people doing? They fought a bloody revolution over about a 1.5% tax, and look at us. Oh, by the way, what I read to you about the preamble of the Bill of Rights, the Supreme Court upheld the understanding of the Bill of Rights as a restriction only on the federal government for over 135 years. So when you talk about Supreme Courts and case precedent and rulings of the Supreme Court, they went back and we've got all this case history. They very rarely go back to the people that were the closest to the Constitution. You'll notice that it kind of all encompasses 20th century judges. I got a daughter about to start law school. I'm not happy about it. I don't know what I did. I'm going to show y'all something. 1833. This is a Supreme Court ruling, Barron v. Baltimore. Y'all don't need to know this. We're not all going to go take the bar exam, but you need to know this from the understanding. This is what Supreme Courts were saying during the period. The Constitution was ordained and established by the people of the United States for themselves, for their own government, and not for the government of the individual states. Each state established a constitution for itself, and in that constitution provided such limitations and restrictions on the powers of its particular government as its judgment dictated. The people of the United States framed such a government for the United States as they supposed best adapted to their situation and best calculated to promote their interests. The powers they conferred on this government were to be exercised by itself, and the limitations on power, if expressed in the general terms, are naturally, and we think necessarily, applicable to the government created by the instrument. What is the Constitution? It's the federal government. No Constitution, no federal government. The federal government wasn't designed and then they built a Constitution around it. They created it right out of parchment. That is the instrument. There are limitations of power granted in this instrument, in the instrument itself, not of distinct governments framed by different persons and for different purposes. The limitations are in the instrument, for the federal government, not for different persons and different purposes in different states. That's 1833. It wasn't until 1925 that the Supreme Court used the 14th Amendment. This is key. That 14th Amendment is pesky. It lives with us today. They used the 14th Amendment some 57 years after the 14th Amendment was ratified to incorporate the Federal Bill of Rights onto the states. This is the ruling. For present purposes, we may and do assume, this is a Supreme Court justice assuming, that the rights of freedom of speech and freedom of the press were among the fundamental personal rights and liberties protected by the Due Process Clause in the 14th Amendment from impairment by the states. Bingo. They got their bullet. They stuck that out there. Nobody balked. Nobody said anything. This is a century ago. And they took power they absolutely did not have. And we were off to the races. Case precedent in all the things I'm talking about, everything that has to do with civil rights and individual freedoms, case precedent basically started there with one of the worst abominations of a ruling in the history of America. And from that point forward, if you build a house on a ridiculously poor foundation, everything on that house to the top is going to be terrible. This is the foundation for much of our case precedent that we're teaching for the last century. We're teaching in law school. By the way, lawyers learn the case method. They're required to take constitutional law. Constitutional law is a misnomer. It basically has no constitution in all law precedent. So what you have is you have a group of people who graduate every single year with predominant viewpoints that say the Supreme Court's the final arbiter of everything all the time, everywhere. The 14th Amendment, by the way, we'll get this 14th Amendment out of the way, which gave benefits to citizens and citizenship to newly freed slaves, was ratified. That's a whole different question. It was ratified, very suspect, but we won't get into that, in 1868. And according to the members of Congress in both parties, it simply constitutionalized the Civil Rights Act of 1866. The 14th Amendment conveyed no power whatsoever to the federal government to apply the Federal Bill of Rights onto the states. Now, the reason it's so important that everybody understand that is that the 14th Amendment, if you go back, and I don't expect everybody to do this, but if you go back and you read the debates of the 14th Amendment, even though it was done kind of shadowy, the debates were clear. When they say constitutionalize the Civil Rights Act, or the Civil Rights Act of 1866, there's certain rules we're all trained to understand or believe. The actions of one Congress can't change the hands of the future Congress, right? You can't write a law right now that binds everybody for the next million years. They can come back and through legislative acts, congressional acts, they can undo whatever you did. Well, acts are not that way. If you pass an act, they are that way. If you pass an act, the next Congress can repeal that act, right? But if it's in the Constitution, now you've tied them down, they've got to amend the Constitution. That's a whole different ballgame. So the concept was this. They wrote the Civil Rights Act of 1866. We got the deal with the newly freed slaves, giving them benefits of citizenship. In that Civil Rights Act, it covers the words that the Supreme Court uses to abuse us, like due process. Everybody's heard that. Hang on, I'll get to the other one. This is the paragraph, section 1 of the 14th Amendment. This is the one that's the tool. It's the weapon to kill us. So, you know what I mean. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of that state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the first one, privileges or immunities. That's a big SCOTUS word. They love using that term. Privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Due process, big deal. If you go back to the 14th Amendment and you see the debates and you see everybody talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and it just constitutionalized that. They just wanted to get what was stated in that Civil Rights Act into the Constitution, so possibly a fast-growing South with a lot more representation wouldn't come in and overturn the Civil Rights Act. So what did they do? If you go back and read it, it tells you due process is access to the courts, the ability to face your accuser, representation, those things. Privileges and immunities, these are acts like the ability to enter into contracts, to buy real estate. It's specified. It had nothing to do with the federal government being able to apply civil rights issues onto the states. Yes, sir.
May I interject one thing
Sure.
here? When that Civil Rights Act was passed in 1866 and then the 14th Amendment was passed, not one southern state was in the United States. Does everybody understand that all the states...
This all happened post-Civil War. None of the southern states were allowed to seat anybody in the Senate when this was approved. Why? Because Lincoln was saying the states never seceded, the Union was never separated. Congress used the idea that they had seceded as a, you're not back in the Union yet, you can't be represented. So what'd they do? They held the 14th Amendment out and they said, you sign off on this or you can't get back in and we'll maintain military control over you. And they had it. You know, Texas was under military control.
1870.
We had a governor placed by a Union Yeah, by a union president. Anyway, little segue. But you're absolutely right. This is 1873, a Supreme Court ruling. Now, understand, this is the slaughterhouse cases. This is 1873. This is after the 14th Amendment. Supreme Court's still there. It's all the same language. But look at this. Was it the purpose? These are the writings of the Supreme Court Justice Miller. Oh, he was the majority, too. This is the winning side. Was it the purpose of the 14th Amendment, by the simple declaration that no state should make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges and immunities of the citizens of the United States, to transfer the security and protection of all civil rights which we have mentioned from the states to the federal government? And where does it declare that Congress shall have the power to enforce that article? Was it intended to bring within the power of Congress the entire domain of civil rights heretofore belonging exclusively to the states? Now, you'd never hear a Supreme Court justice asking these questions today. Never. All this and more must follow if the proposition of the plaintiffs in error be sound. The effect is to fetter and degrade the state governments by subjecting them to the control of Congress in the exercise of powers heretofore universally conceded to them of the most ordinary and fundamental character. We are convinced that no such results were intended by the Congress which proposed these amendments, nor by the legislatures of the states which ratified them. This is after the 14th Amendment. These Supreme Court justices knew what everything meant in the Constitution. Now, granted, we've had Supreme Court justices trying to take power since 3.5 years after the Constitution was ratified, but not in this kind of manner. Today, they take anything they want all the time. There's no kickback. There's no knee-jerk reaction. Nobody calls them on it. This abuse, we've all basically been indoctrinated in. Since the creation of this abomination known as the incorporation doctrine, the states have perpetually found themselves in front of this all-powerful national Supreme Court over such states' rights issues as whether or not the people of a supposedly free and independent state, I use that with a tongue-in-cheek, you know what I mean, can have the name of God, Scripture, or the Ten Commandments in a public building. Or decide if burning a Texas flag or a U.S. flag is a crime or free speech. Decide to recognize marriage between one man and one woman. Decide if pornography is art or pornography. Decide if we want to write laws against abortion as a choice of birth control. Or decide whether or not to pay for education to be legal aliens. Or decide any question that concerns the right to bear arms. There's going to be those that simply don't want to accept the fact that the Second Amendment doesn't protect them from their state. But it does not. It absolutely does not. As a matter of fact, using the Second Amendment as your weapon to protect yourself from your state is helping to destroy our gun rights. Really and truly, we're Texans. There's 26 million of us. Folks, that's almost 10 times more in the state of Texas today than there were in all 13 states when they ratified and implemented the Constitution. We got lots of smarts in Texas, by the way. We can manage our own affairs. We don't need a bureaucrat 1,000 miles away dictating to us whether or not we can have God or the Ten Commandments in a public building in Texas. That's a discussion for Texans. Now, are you ready? Most of us think we want limited government. We support the Constitution, but we really don't. We hold up our pocket constitutions, we quote Jefferson, and all the while we beg for the national government to involve itself in areas for which it has no authority. Second Amendment, abortion, marriage, take your pick. Those are issues for Texans in Texas, for Californians in California, New Yorkers in New York. It has nothing to do with the federal government dictating to 316 million individuals. Not supposed to be that way. This is not what we learn in school. Protecting natural rights and liberties is meant to be the responsibility of the citizens of each state, not the responsibility of a small group of political elites. Scale is a big deal for me. I got into scale about 3 years ago when I say scale, 316 plus million individual Americans today. We are managed by 546 individuals. Congress, judiciary, and executive branch. 546 people manage us. And even on a more solemn note, 5 of 9 unelected individuals actually manage all of us. Unelected individuals. You can't get to the situation we're in today without everybody's support. And all of us, and myself included, folks, I was the biggest neocon you ever laid eyes on 10 years ago. We need to go drop bombs everywhere where they need freedom. If we're over there, it's because we're supposed to be over there. If they're sending my family member over there and they've got a chance of getting killed, it's pretty important. No. I've gone all the way the other way. I'm a Republican that the Republican Party is over. Jeffersonian republicanism doesn't exist except with individuals walking around who understand it. What we have today is this big national grouping, and we all are looking for everything to be answered in this grand scale for 316 million of us. Scale is a big deal. There's too many people being led by too few. Texas, I see your Texas National t-shirt. I'm throwing this out there. Don't jump up and down. I'm not an advocate of secession. Texas, well...
You'll come around. You're talking yourself into it.
Texas, I don't have to talk myself into it. Historically speaking, secession happens. You know how it happens? How many countries are there in the Soviet Union or Russia today? Did she leave already? What is there, 13 now? How'd that happen? It happened because people got tired. They just quit.
They moved to the...
It wasn't a revolution. When it fell...
And the U.S. recognized their secession from the Soviet Union.
Oh, well, yeah, I get that. But Lincoln went around. Now, what I'm getting at is, Texas, and I'm only throwing this out there, if we were the country of Texas, we'd be the 45th largest country in the world. But we're not. We're a county in an extremely large state, the United States, that you can't possibly manage with 546 individuals. Why is that? It's because we have no context of character of the people who run the show. They don't really care. And we have no federalism for which the framers built into the Constitution to divest all that power to the states. All that power has been driven to the middle. And nobody recognizes this. All that power is at the federal government. We're going to have to start seeing this and understanding that our battle is in Texas. Our Cajun friends have a battle in Louisiana. Our Okie friends have a battle in Oklahoma. They're not our battles. We got enough issues to deal with in Texas. I think we all can agree to that. I'm dead serious about this. We should be telling this tyrannical national government that unless it concerns the enumerated powers delegated to it by the states, stay out of the business of Texas.
Yep.
Folks, that's every state. And when I say I'm not an advocate of secession, here's my deal. This isn't about Texas wanting to separate from the rest of the states. This is about Texas needing to get the rest of the states to understand, to get their head out of the rear and understand that it's all 50 states against this one out-of-control, unlimited national government. The other states aren't creating problems for us. We're all trying to use the federal government, or the national government, as a weapon. We've got to stop doing that. We've got to start making our state legislators understand. They've got to draw the lines and say, you know what, we've been going along with this charade too long. We're not going to participate anymore. You guys keep trying to manipulate the other states. Well, we won't give you the money. Okay, keep the money. We won't give you our fuel tax. And we will opt out of highway funding. Wouldn't that be nice? But right now, and I was in state legislature for a couple of weeks this last go-around, and it doesn't look good for having people who understand the relationship. Just so everybody understands, the opposite of nationalism is what the framers of the Constitution were creating. Everybody likes to use the term free markets these days. It's in vogue. You know, if you want to talk economy, just use free markets. You sound like you know what you're talking about. They didn't even know what free market meant, but they were the original free marketeers. The framers of the Constitution, they knew by leaving the states to govern themselves, liberty would have maximum protection. They knew that people would gravitate towards those states that were the most free, therefore limiting the desire of states to enact laws that would infringe upon individual freedom. If you had 50 different states that truly managed their own affairs, and you got one that wanted to write really stupid legislation that just totally taxed everybody into oblivion and put them in servitude, they'd vacate. People would leave. They're trying to leave now. They're trying to leave these other states and come to Texas until they get here and realize that it's kind of a smokescreen. Texas is doing very, very well among all 50 states. They're all in the tank. Texas, I heard Susan Combs, our exiting state comptroller, say on the Wilcox show yesterday on Sirius Radio, satellite, that Texas is doing great. We're setting the pace. We're doing well. We are among the losers. There's not a winning economy in the United States today, by the way. What she didn't go to tell him was that, I don't know, little pieces of fact like in the last 10 years, Texas' population has grown by about 20+%, a little over 20%. In the same 10-year period, our debt, sovereign debt in Texas has grown by over 150%. So, if you ever hear a state representative or a state senator throw out there that, our population's growing. Oh yeah? Well, it's not growing that fast. 75% or more of our debt is carried by municipalities and school districts.
Amen.
Well, guess what? Our state legislators go in every session and renew a little security blanket, guaranteeing that they will underwrite all the bonds written in the state of Texas from these schools and municipalities, meaning that they put you on the hook for a $50 million football stadium in West Texas. So this is insidious as far as the debt and the relationship between the state and the federal. This is not the way it was designed, not by any stretch. The idea that everybody understands in Texas, and we'll go back to the marriage thing. In Texas, as a free and independent state, we should be able to have a discussion about marriage in Texas. And if we want to say we don't want to charge a fee for you getting married as a government, that should be between you, your spouse, and your pastor or priest or what have you. If we wanted to say that, we could. If we wanted to say, no, we got to charge a fee, but we're going to put in our Constitution that it's between one man and one woman, we could do that, right? Everybody knows we did that. So I never get upset about the argument over marriage, because the only reason you would even have to talk about it in Texas is if somebody came up and said, we want to amend the Texas Constitution. Now that's a discussion. Because in Texas, we kind of got that covered. Right? Now my question to you is, and I want y'all to rethink everything you see on national media. We can talk about abortion if you want to. Let's talk about guns. If the state of New York and the citizens of New York elect their representatives to go to their state legislature and write laws that so much as ban guns, what business is it of ours? Zero. Inherently, I'm going to get somebody who goes, we don't want that to happen here. Well, let me tell you something. If you keep driving all this unconstitutional power to the central and giving all this power to the federal government and asking 9 unelected individuals to rule over other states, capital S, their own countries, we're giving them the power to do whatever they want over all 50 states. You don't want that. By the way, a little reminder, politics never moves right. Okay? The historical cycle is that as a new society gives birth, it becomes out of the dust of a failed society at its embryonic stage. When it first establishes, it is the most free and independent, most prosperous, and most moral character you will ever find. And it immediately starts moving left. And it goes through this decline all the way Never been a society in history that moved back right to correct itself. Doesn't happen. So what happens? You got far left, you got far right. We're going to meet in the middle. There's your moderate. So the right moves left, the left moves to their far left, then the left moves over here. We get these moderates. Republicans become more and more Democrat-like, Republican-like, and we do this. It's a historical cycle. This is what we're doing constantly. So I see a lot of people here of age, and I think you'll totally agree with me. A lot of what Republicans speak and advocate for today, our grandparents would call communism. Right? This collective mentality we have today, this no, we'll take care of you mentality, my grandparents would have kicked you as far as they could and then thrown rocks at you. This is not the mentality that this country was founded on. The idea that we want, if Texans want to have complete open carry, if we want to have open carry and minimal, if we want to have no restrictions on guns, and so you can own any weapon you can afford to buy, we could do that. And what business would be of people in another state? None. Now, I want you to picture this. This nationalizing of all these social issues, this is why we go to our state house. There's so many offensive things in it. Don't let the smile fool you. This just irritates me beyond belief. I'm 48 years old. I live in a state, the greatest state in this country, greatest state in the world for all I care. And in our state capital, against our moral traditions, values, and principles, we have supposedly conservative, constitutionally minded individuals arguing amongst themselves over a bill to abort babies in the womb at 20 weeks, up to 21